just make sure that the stream is up and running. Test 1 2 1 2. Can I be heard over the stream?
No, I haven't advertised that right now.
Okay.
I shall let you know in a minute.
Well, I can see my mouse moving around. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump in a little bit. So, welcome back to GameMaker. This is gonna be my second video on GameMaker. We can, or you can head to our YouTube channel to check out my first video on GameMaker, where I made just a terrible dragon game, but it was a lot of fun. This time,
You may increase your mic volume a little bit.
okay, we'll increase my mic a little bit. Let me see. Dan, where was that?
You notice the mic volume?
Yeah, to increase it.
Sound control panel?
Just having some technical difficulties. Okay.
Yeah. I'll put it up like 50.
Alright. Testing. Let me know how I sound. Hopefully the mic's working now. Okay, so, yeah, welcome back to GameMaker. This is my newer game, which I'm just calling Outside. Awesome. So, basically your goal is to just get outside. It's pretty simple. You start off in a little cave, and I'll just run through the game really quick. I made this game mostly with coding instead of just the quick tabs and stuff like I used in the last video. And as you can tell, this one has sound, which is really cool. And I keep dying. There we go. So, just basic Goomba rules like in Mario. Land on its head and it dies. But if you run into it, it kills you. Basically, I set up the coding so that if the bottom half of the player hits the top half of the enemy, then it dies. And I set up the portals to just lead you to the next level, which makes it pretty simple. Now we have spikes. Also, you'll note, I have some enemies that just fall off of ledges, and others that stay put. They detect ledges and turn around, which I can show the coding for that a little later. I don't think I've successfully made it past this level yet. Of course, this is one of my games, so I have to make it extremely difficult for anyone who plays, including myself. Okay, game's really loud. Let me just lower that really quick. Alright, let me know how that sounds. There we go. Just testing. Audio better? I'll just continue playing while we're testing. Okay, cool.
Oh yeah, much better.
Awesome. Hopefully next stream we'll have all this sorted out before the stream starts. That would be nice. Oh no. There we go. Oh, and I died. Okay, so I have a few quick shortcuts. Click Q and it restarts the entire game. Click W, it leads to the final boss level. it's useful to have these in pre-production so that you can just quickly go to wherever you need to and test out what you're trying to test. Such as the boss, which actually has lives. Getting the lives to work was actually a lot easier with code from my experience, rather than, yay, I won, rather than just using the quick tabs and stuff. The quick tabs seem to be pretty confusing, because I'm not entirely sure how they run. So, let's just hop right into it. So, our original player, which you can see at the start of each level, there he is, just a little green block. Basically, I started off with setting up the animation speed, first of all, because each of these rooms run at 60 frames per second. So if I didn't set the animation speed to half, it looks like it's spazzing out. So you just slow that down by setting the image speed to 0.5. If you set it to anything lower, then it'll go slower. Anything faster, it'll go faster. Or a higher number, then it goes faster. And then in the create event, we just set up a few variables that we can use in the step event, where we actually use all of these variables. So basically, I skipped using the in-game gravity and collision and solids and stuff, because that kind of got sticky, where the player would move over a block and get stuck to it, or it would run into a wall and kind of get stuck for a minute, and you'd have to move and shimmy out, and it just got awkward. So we set the grav to a basic low number so it doesn't pull you down too quickly, and set the horizontal speed, vertical speed, jump speed, everything, so that you can go into the step, which is an action per frame, and since these rooms are running at 60 frames, it registers pretty quickly. You go into the step and you set up the basic player input, react to input, because, you know, if you just have the input, that's great, it's registering you, but what is it going to do with that input? So you just set that up pretty simple, and if it collides with the walls, then, or if it meets with the walls, then it tells you what exactly to do. Let's see. Horizontal collision, in case it runs into the sides, like we have here in the first level. There's a little block here missing that isn't a brighter one, which is the wall. I also put this background wall just for kind of flavor, you know, so it kind of looks like everything's being held up at first. But if we jump into the game and you look, the background doesn't stop the player because it's not in our programming, but the actual walls do. So if you try, yeah, you can go right through the background, no problem. But if you try running into a wall, you come to a complete stop. So we got that all set up. Let's see, there's the variables. Done with the map. Vertical collision, so it doesn't just fall through the floor or go flying up into space. We had that issue a few times in the last live stream with the chickens hitting the floor and then just pinging off into space. While it's amusing, it doesn't really make for great gameplay. So there's the step function that we set up for the player, and on Game Start, I just set up the basic game loop that you hear. It's nothing special, just a simple synth type thing, which I got from freesound.com, so hopefully YouTube won't take this down later when we post it. I can give credits at the end of stream if anyone is interested in getting any of the tunes used, including the jump, the final boss music, or the game loop. So over here I just set up some basic quick keys like escape to end the game, space to play the jump audio, which is pretty simple, you just play it, and then Q key to restart, and the W to just go straight to the final boss. The main reason I put that in is because I don't have all of the levels finished yet, which I figured we could work on a few during the live stream. Also give time for anyone if they have any questions, which if you do have any questions, please let me know now. I will answer them as I see them. Also, for anyone watching this on YouTube, if you have any questions, just leave a comment below and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. So now, let's see. We set it up so that on the start it's just pretty basic. You just get to know the jumping, one enemy, so you know, yes, there are threats in this game, and then the portal at the end. It's a pretty basic platformer layout, so anyone jumping into the game can learn it pretty easily. And when you go into level 1, we introduce spikes, a few more enemies, you know. Again, basic platformer, go from the left to the right. Then we lead to level 2, there's a few more spikes, a few more enemies, kind of ramping it up. Level 3, you start on the right. So hopefully you get confused and run off to the right and die immediately. I've played enough Dark Souls to want to screw the player over as much as possible. Which, unfortunately, the only player is me, so it's not the best idea. But anyway, moving on to the enemies. Set the animation speed. I set it a little bit slower because the enemies actually have more sprites than the player. Each of these sprites just goes on into the next. If we show the preview, you can see it kind of pulsing a little bit. I didn't set it up too elaborate, so I could just get on with actually making the game. And then, of course, we have the same kind of variables. We have an actual direction, though. The player didn't have a direction because you're controlling it. Move speed and direction set up for the enemy so it can move on its own. And then basic image speed 0.3, so it's not undulating too quickly. And then we get into some of the more elaborate coding. Now, the same vertical and horizontal collision except for this code right here, which if you don't want the enemy flying off the edge, which you saw earlier where some did just jump off the edge and some would just stop at the edge and turn around and go back. Right here it basically just says if you don't want it to jump, which that's one of the variables I created right here, don't jump 0. If you don't want it to jump off the edge and the position does not meet at a certain height, then the direction just turns around if it's on a wall. So, like I said, basically if it just doesn't detect a ledge, then it turns right around, which is pretty useful so it doesn't just fly off the edge. We actually have that example here at the beginning. So as you can see, he goes and then he stops at the edges, and basically what we did was we made little detection points that were just below the enemy and slightly off to the sides, so that if it no longer detects a wall, then it just turns around. Pretty simple. I'm not much of a coding person, so the fact that I'm able to do this I think is pretty awesome in GameMaker. So then we go, yeah, that's just the basic step. Also, the enemy collision, if it actually collides with the player, if it collides with the, if the bottom half of the player collides with the top half of the enemy, then it dies. But if that doesn't happen, then the room restarts because you died. Such as running headfirst into an enemy doesn't work very well in this game. So then we have just a basic wall. It needs to be an object. It doesn't really do anything. And this is the enemy that doesn't jump off the ledges, so it just kind of hits the edge and then turns around. We made its parent the regular enemy, so we didn't have to recode everything. And then if you go into the no jump, it just sets it to don't jump. Sets it to 1 so that it does detect the ledges, whereas the regular enemy, it's set to 0. So it doesn't care if there's a ledge, it's going to jump anyway. It's pretty easy to set parenting and everything. And then we just have a background wall. Now here's something that I've learned after quite a bit of testing. I would start playing the game and the player would go behind these walls and just be completely invisible, and that got very annoying very quickly because you wouldn't be able to see the player. How would you know where you're jumping? So I found out the greater the number in the depth field, the farther back it goes. So if it's at 0, that's the basic mid-range for where your action is going to happen, I guess. But if it's a higher number, then it's further in the background, which you can see I explained a little bit earlier, where the player cuts in front of the background, but he collides with the walls, because the walls are also at depth 0. So the background doesn't interfere with the actual player, well, with viewing the player. So there's the background walls. And the portals. The portals were pretty fun, mostly to make all of the sprites. I think that's pretty cool. But it was pretty fun to make, and it was pretty simple. Basically, just I added an event, a collide event with the player, and if it does collide with the player, then it goes to the next room. And the next room just basically takes these in order, which I leveled them out, or I named them out, start, level 1, 2, 3, etc. until it goes to the final boss. So that makes things pretty easy on that end. And I also put these bars of just death. Once you touch them, you're dead. And I set those up not just to be mean, like, hey, you touched this edge, but mostly so that if the player goes outside of bounds somewhere where they aren't supposed to be, then they die. And I mostly set it up this way instead of going in and, don't delete anything, setting up, let's see, other outside room. You could set it to where if it's outside the room, then the game restarts. But the problem is if you get, for example, let's see, is this it? No. Yeah, for example, up here, if the player character actually gets moved up here, and he's dealing with these two enemies, and then he jumps, he would go outside the screen, and the game would restart, and that would not be very good. So I set up these black bars of death, basically, to just cover the sides and the bottom, so if you fall out of the world, then you're not just eternally stuck on this screen. Or if you go out of the sides where you're not supposed to be, then, you know, it just kind of restarts the level so you can keep going. So let's just delete that. And on game start, I started the loop or the sound loop, so if you set it to true, then it'll just continue looping. And the reason you want it on game start and not room start is that once you set it to room start and you enter a new room, the sound from the previous room will continue playing until it ends, while simultaneously starting the new sound as you enter the new room, and it doesn't sound very good. Everything's overlapping each other. So it's better to just do game start, loop it, you're good. And I just put some quick keys, as I mentioned, escape to end the game, jump audio, etc, etc. Oh, don't want to delete anything. So let's see, then we have these spikes. Basically, I just have it as a step, so it registers every frame. If it meets up with the player, then the room restarts. It's pretty simple, just instant death. The player only has 1 life, so why would it bother? And for the final level, I made a different sprite because I figured you're actually outside, you know, it's kind of sunny. You're not in, like, caves anymore or anything. So you'd be a little bit of a happier sprite. You'd be a little brighter. If you look closely, he's kind of missing edges because he's, I don't know, he's happy. It's a happy little square. So basically it's just a duplicate of the player. I just set everything up again just to make sure everything worked cleanly. And I just renamed everything so that it would collide with the dirt blocks, which are down here. It's pretty simple, just a brown block with some grass on top so you know where you can land and where you can't. Let's see. And I set up the ground blocks the same as these darker shaded walls so that they're set in the background. You don't have to worry about them. You don't land on them, there's no collision or anything. And then lastly we have the boss, which was pretty fun to make, not just because it's a giant square, just like everything else, but I made it so that it was a child of the enemy, same as the no jump enemy was a child of the regular enemy. So it has the same create animation speed and variables, so I can work with that pretty simply. And I just set up the same collision I just modified it so that it can land on the dirt and continue along. And I made it so that it doesn't have to jump if it doesn't want to, which I haven't implemented that, so it's not really no point for it to be there. But then I went in here, hold on, let's see, that's the enemy, what am I doing? Let's go over to the boss, and on room start I set the lives to 3. Instead of putting it to game start setting the lives to 3, if you die and come back, then the lives would still be wherever you left them. So if you hit it twice, then you died and came back, then you'd only have to hit it once, and that seems a little broken. So I set it on room start instead of game start, but basically I use the tab, just set the lives to 3, and then you go in here and just, if the lives are 3, well, once you collide with the player, if the lives are 3, set it down to 2. If it collides again at the top half to actually hurt it, then set it down to 1. If it goes down to 1 and you land on it again, then just destroy it. Otherwise, room restart, you're dead. So, I mean, it's a pretty simple game. It's not too much to it. Oh yeah, for the background, I got this to move, which is pretty cool, just by setting the horizontal speed to 1. These have to be integers, they can't be partial, so they can only go at certain speeds. But if you wanted it really fast, you could set it to something like 20, which is insanely fast. You probably don't want any rooms with a background speed of 20. Oh, let's look and see how that is. Yeah, that's a tornado. Our little square has found himself in a tornado. So let's fix that really quick. I don't really feel like leaving him in a tornado. So that's pretty easy. Also, I set up the rooms so that, like, the first level is kind of, it's blocky, you know, it's dark. Second level, it's a little brighter, still blocky, etc., etc. It slowly gets lighter and lighter until you're outside. Hence the name, outside. I thought it was pretty cool. Again, for anyone who might just now be joining us, feel free to ask me any questions. I'm just running through this game that I made last week, or within the last week. And let me see. Oh, for the sounds, I went to just freesound.org. You can find anything. I can give the credits out later if anyone's interested in getting these specific sounds. Yeah, so let's just run through the game really quick. And there it is on game start. The music starts playing, and you can hear the jumps, only when I press spacebar. Something I do have a question for anyone who's watching. I don't know how to make the jump only trigger when I start jumping. For example, if I keep spamming it, you keep hearing it, and that gets a little annoying. Especially if you fall off an edge and you don't actually jump. Then it's just another sound. Let's see. So if anyone has an answer to that, that would be very useful. Uh-oh, something happened. Portal isn't working. Because I got rid of the collision. Of course I did. Where was that? And next room. There it is. Easy to set up. It's another thing I do like about GameMaker. All the mistakes that you might make are pretty easy to fix. And they're pretty easy to find because everything's just literally right there on the side. You can see everything that's that you're using for the current game. Let's see, and the portal works, yay. Also something as far as the GameMaker goes, you can actually group things, which are really cool. So if you wanted just level 1 stuff, then you can just put the wall in there, backgrounds, etc., etc., and it all works. You don't have to worry about any of that extra coding because you moved something to a different folder. I know I ran into that issue a lot using Reaper, which is not a game engine, but anyone who's used Reaper would understand. You move one audio file and everything stops working. So here we go. You can see most of these enemies are detecting the ledges and turning around rather than just falling off and coming after the player. Now they don't have actual tracking of where the player is, they just have mindless movement. There is a way to make enemies follow you. Might implement that in the next video, if I do another stream. So yeah. Oh, I fell down. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Oh, I fell off. And I didn't die, we found an issue. Let's fix that. Oh yeah, because I moved the player, didn't I? There we go. So, as you can see, the player actually kind of pulses a little bit quicker than the enemies. Since the enemies have a few more frames of animation, I decided to slow them down a little bit. Oh. Get around all these enemies. Tend to die a lot on these levels. They're fun though. Alright, the camera tracking. I didn't actually explain that. So if you go into a level, here, let's close that. If you go into a level, you can enable the use of views. So this one uses it. So go into views, and then enable the use of views, visible when room starts, and then you set how big your view wants to be, and how much of the screen traces where the player is. So if you want it to stay, if you want it to keep up with the player where he's at the very center of the screen, then you put just the same dimensions as the screen size. But if you want the player to have to push the edges, then you could put like 1 and 1. So let's test that. So you can kind of have more hidden views on the sides where they only have to be 1 pixel away from the edge and they can push it away. Or push the view off to the side. I think I modified a different level. Yeah, it was this one. So let's see. So you see I passed the center of the screen and it's not moving. I actually have to push the screen, which isn't very useful in this kind of game, because I can't see what's ahead of me. So let's just move that back. There we go. And try that again. So in GameMaker, I've mostly been working with platformers and such, mostly so I can learn the code and how GameMaker actually works, since platformers are kind of easy to make in this engine. But I know there are other types of games that you can make with this, such as shooters. You can actually make 3D stuff. I've seen it in the settings. I have no idea how, but that would be pretty interesting to maybe stream if I figure it out. Let's see. Oh, I died. I mentioned this in the last video, but the game Undertale was actually made in this engine, which you can see why. It's kind of a simple game, but it is a lot of fun. Ooh. Oh, here we go. There we go. I don't know why I decided to actually make platformers. I'm pretty bad at them. And going back to what I was mentioning earlier, if we did the outside view game restart, then right there at the end I would have died just from exiting the screen, just because I was jumping trying to kill those things. And that's no fun for anyone. Well, I died again. Anyway. In the boss level. Pretty easy boss, but you know, pretty easy game. Yay, we're outside. So, we never actually designed level 4. So I was thinking something kind of simple just to show off climbing. That you have to start jumping and everything to get to the end rather than just moving to one direction. Moving to the right. So maybe we can just have some simple platforming stuff. Nothing too special. And of course you need enemies. Wouldn't be a real game without enemies, right? There we go. But yeah, basically just filling this out until you get up to the top. And then had it set up so that the next room you would have to climb even more. The name of the game is Outside, so climbing seems to fit that theme pretty well until you finally get outside and fight the boss, and then I guess you're free. I haven't quite figured out how to set up a end of game trigger, I guess. I know that there is a I know that there's a thing in here to set on game end, so you can do stuff with the game end, but I haven't looked into that yet. But yeah. Let's see. So one of my favorite things so far in GameMaker has been the ability to just mess with your sprites whenever you want to. Like if we wanted a pink line on the inside of this because we can, why not? Oh, let's not make it that bad. There we go. That and that. Then this is all you have to do. And you've already got something animated. You can kind of see a preview over here. There's a lot of different frames to go through. Oh, there we go. And of course there's more commands and such that you can do with these sprites, such as stand up, where it lays down kind of flat and then it starts to stand up, or fade out, where it just starts turning invisible, fade to color, where it goes from one color to another. So this portal is purple. Let's say after you go through it, it turns yellow. Just to kind of show, yes, you went through it, you're going to the next level, and then it would fade to yellow, and then maybe you could cut to the next level. It's got a lot of interesting stuff like that I haven't looked into yet, but mostly I just wanted to show off that, well, with coding, the platforming skills, collision, etc. seems to be a lot easier to manage, rather than just using the tabs given to you. Such as gravity. I don't have any gravity settings actually applied in the game, but it looks like there's gravity because I have the collisions set in the coding. Let me see. Initialize variables, right here. Grav is at 0.02, so nothing's actually solid or uses physics in the game. I found out in my last game that's what caused a lot of the problems that I was running into, where things would just kind of stick to each other, like the dragon going through the maze would stick to the walls. And it made it pretty difficult to actually navigate the maze because you would get stuck on a wall and not be able to go through the corner. Stuff like that. So basically, I need continue filling this out. And maybe I can add some moving platforms at some point once I figure that out. Let's see. Oh yeah, I need to set up the view on this. So just enable the views, and that's all set up. And let's just modify these numbers. And there we go. So now when the player reaches the center of the screen will move with them. Just super useful. Alright. Oh, and as you noticed, all of these rooms are at 60 frames per second. It keeps things kind of fast, it keeps the responses quick, since everything's running on a step maneuver instead of just input reaction. So every frame has listeners already in place for you using these step maneuvers like these. So everything that you put in a step already sets up a listener so that anytime you press a button, it automatically reacts within those 60 frames. If it was running at 30 frames, it would still react, but it would have a slight delay since it's running at 30. Here, let's show that off really quick. It's not a huge difference, but it is noticeable, especially when trying to run from enemies or something. See, everything's moving a lot slower. It's like we're on the moon. It's literally half the speed. So move that up to, or back up to 60. And it should be what we're used to, which would be twice the speed of 30. Look at that. And it's reacting a lot quicker to my button movements. So that's a lot of fun. So I'm just going to give a few minutes for anyone who has any questions while I try and run through this game again. Oh. And I'm probably going to die a lot. As I said before, I'm not the best at platformers. I spent most of my time playing Spyro instead of Mario when I was a kid. Oh, even today, I do still play Spyro. Still don't touch Mario. Don't know why. Not a huge fan. But anyway. Here we go. Oh, this level. Maybe I should do like Dark Souls and just put a backstory to each of the enemies. Why they're here. Why some of them jump off the ledges while others don't. That would be fun to set up. So a lot of people actually, well, a lot of producers actually use GameMaker to set up. Oh, here we are. Oh, I didn't finish this. But a lot of game producers actually use GameMaker to set up prototypes of their games, which I can see why. You just set up a basic prototype like this, and then each of these enemies maybe turns into a gunner that's trying to shoot you down or something, and you just turn into a, I don't know, just a little person trying to run through and get to the end, get out of this cave. I've been watching a lot of Inside gameplay, so my first thought, that's the kid. These are all the people trying to chase you. Oh, don't want two kids. There we go. So, and then all the spikes could be the traps and puzzles that you have to get through. But yeah, I could definitely see how this could be used for not only a full-on game, if you figure out the coding and make your own sprites and noises and such, but I could also see how this could be a great prototyping tool for making whatever you want come to life. And especially if you have animators that are actually good at creating things that you lay out for them and you just need to show them, hey, this is what I want it to look like, but, you know, obviously I'm going to need designers to fix everything. Then they can move on to Unreal Engine or something more 3D, more graphically adept, I guess. And then everything would look a lot better. I'm really enjoying Game Engine, by the way. GameMaker, yes. I'm really enjoying this game engine named GameMaker. Oh, there they go, all falling. I think my next step is going to be figuring out how certain enemies can track the player, and maybe if certain enemies can jump when they detect ledges above them. I don't think that would be too difficult. Because I already have these enemies that detect ledges and then they turn around. So maybe if they detect the ledge above them, they can just jump. Or something. Or maybe they just climb the wall. I don't know. Would be interesting though. Oh, there we go. Let's see if I can actually make it to the end. Again. There we go. This is a lot of fun. Especially all this tedious work. As I said, it is tedious, but I do enjoy stuff like this.
Kelsey, do you have the enemies collision each other and change the direction? So they're not passing each other, but they bounce off each other?
Yes. Actually, you can go into the question was, can I have enemies that actually bounce off of each other so they don't just keep running through each other? Yes, I can. If you get the coding right and basically you just do like a detection on either side. If it detects another enemy to its side, then it could just reverse and turn around. I think I have something similar. It would basically just be the vertical collision, but with enemies instead of walls, which would be pretty cool. Might have to look into that next time too. Let's see if we can actually make it through this level. Of course, we have to get there. You know what I could do? Uh-oh. Appears we've run into one of the few bugs that GameMaker has. Sometimes if you start the demo and then you quit too soon, then it crashes a little bit. And it runs as if you're still running the game, but you're not. So, simple restart will fix that. And we didn't actually change anything, so that's fine. It's a reminder to save at every possible moment. Just open everything back up. Okay, here we go. Oh, okay, see, it did save everything. Alright, if we just add key press, let's do just one, something simple. Then we can go to, where is it? Right here. Then we can go straight to level 4. So we don't have to play through everything again. I'd have to say that GameMaker is the engine with the least amount of crashes that I've used. I know Unreal, if you don't know how to use it, it crashes like crazy. The biggest example I have is using static meshes too often. Had an issue with a teammate that would only use static meshes and did not know how to turn them into full-on things. Okay, anyway. So yeah, I haven't really found very many issues with GameMaker. Mostly just that one bug where sometimes if you're going too quickly, it thinks that the game is still running even though it's not. But that's me being impatient. It's not really the engine's fault. So let's see. Alright, to change the music from the regular game loop to that music that's at the very end, I did a couple checks just to see if the game loop is playing, then to stop it and start playing the music for the final boss. But I also had this issue where it would stop the loop, but if you died to the boss and then came back, it would start the final boss song again, and it would be just an overlapping tune playing twice or 3 times depending on how many times you died. And that got extremely annoying extremely fast. So I had to do another check to see if the final boss music's already playing, then stop it and start it again. So we can check that out really quick. So if we just go off to the side, see it restarts. And then of course if you just run into it, it restarts. And he should have 3 lives again. Yep. There we go. Pretty simple. It's not too much, it's mostly just coding, which once you start to understand it, it's not too difficult, just getting the hang of like how these if functions work in GameMaker rather than just something like Java. Once you get the hang of all that, then all of this is really easy, and it runs a lot smoother once you start using coding. Because I know in my last game I just used the quick tabs and such, and that got very messy very quickly. Which is why in my last live stream my dragon would only jump at a certain distance, and he wouldn't really be able to go any farther. He couldn't go straight up or backwards. It was always just a forward lunge at like 45 degrees, because I didn't know how to code just a basic jump, and I wasn't using the step function. So now I know, and it's working a lot better. So anyone on the live stream, if you have any last minute questions, go ahead and ask now. Anyone who's watching this later on YouTube, go ahead and leave a comment if you have any questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. This was my game outside that I've been messing with and using this week. Mostly playing around with the coding, trying to figure out how it all works. And so far it seems to be working a lot better now that I know how to use the coding a little bit easier. So now you don't stick to walls, you don't stick to the roof. That was an issue I had in the last game. I don't think I showed it off, but if you kept holding spacebar when you touched a ceiling, you would just stick to it. But not anymore, because we have the collision all set up through code and checks and such. So yeah. Alright, I think I'm going to look into some more enemy actions, such as enemies colliding with each other and bouncing off, or enemies learning how to climb walls or jump. I'd definitely like to get maybe like a rotation on the player's sprite, so when it jumps it kind of rotates If anyone's played Geometry Dash or the Impossible Game, you know, just a little square rotation to show that it's lunging forward a little bit more instead of just floating like this. I think that would be pretty cool. I'd have to look into it. So, I think that might wrap it up for today. I've had a lot of fun with this GameMaker project, and I'd definitely like to build on it some more and maybe build up the enemies, make a better boss, finish out level 4 and 5 and such, and add some more sound effects, because right now it's kind of boring. So that'll probably be on the next stream. Thank you guys so much for watching, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be watching the stream for a little bit after the stream. See you guys on the next one.